Hello everyone, welcome to this tropical update. Before we get into the video, I would like to make it clear that I am not a meteorologist and nothing I say is official nor should be taken as official information. Tropical Storm Fiona formed a few days ago, and right now the cyclone is sheared, and we can see this as evident by the exposed low-level circulation as well as displaced convection off to the east of the center. We can see this on infrared imagery where we have cold convection firing displaced from the center over here. The center of circulation is about right here, and closer to the center we are seeing there was some brief blow-ups. However, that is very limited and right now is not indicative of any kind of significant blow-ups. Despite the appearance, Recon did go in there earlier and did find that at the flight level hurricane force winds were occurring around 65 knots. However, this obviously does not correlate to surface winds, and the plane measured that surface winds are likely around 60 miles per hour. The plane did also find that the pressure is remaining steady at around 1006 millibars, and even though the cyclone's general motion is towards the west, there is some slight southerly change in this direction, and this is also evident in satellite imagery throughout the day. The National Hurricane Center's forecast depicts the westward motion, where at about 36 hours the storm begins to approach the upper islands of the Lesser Antilles, where we do have a tropical storm warning in effect for a lot of those islands. However, towards the end of the 3-day period, there are also tropical storm watches in effect for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. After the 3-day period, for days 4 and 5, the storm begins to gain more latitude. However, this part of the forecast is a lot more uncertain, and I'll talk about that later in this video. The environmental conditions for the storm are only marginal for strengthening, where we have moderate wind shear that should start to increase some by around the 48-hour mark, and the relative humidity of the atmosphere is also pretty dry. Due to this, the intensity forecast is uncertain, where the upper end of the guidance does show some more strengthening throughout the 5-day period, while other models have a more flat-lined intensity where the storm doesn't change much. The short-term intensity forecast will depend more on how well the cyclone performs against the current conditions, and fluctuations up and down are likely to occur as it approaches the islands and Puerto Rico. Regardless, a 10-knot deviation up or down will not matter much for impacts in the short term, where the National Hurricane Center writes here in their key messages, tropical storm conditions are expected in the Leeward Islands within the warning area by Friday evening. Tropical storm conditions are possible within the watch area across the Virgin Islands beginning on Saturday, and then reaching Puerto Rico late Saturday and Saturday night. Heavy rains from Fiona reach the northern Leeward Islands Friday afternoon, spreading to the British and U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico Saturday into Sunday morning, and reaching eastern Hispaniola Sunday. This rainfall may produce flash and urban flooding, along with isolated mudslides in area of higher terrain. Considerable flood impacts are possible across the eastern portions of Puerto Rico. Fiona is expected to move near Hispaniola early next week, and watches could be required for parts of the island on Friday. While the short-term intensity forecast doesn't matter much for impacts, as we go out further, it becomes apparent that depending on the strength of the storm, there begins to be some disagreement on where the storm will be. The stronger side of the guidance has a more eastward weighted position. The weaker solutions, however, are more on the west towards Cuba, Haiti, and Jamaica. Right now, the storm is being steered by the surging winds along the underside of a ridge of high pressure. And this general motion should continue throughout the next 3 days. However, once again, as the intensity begins to add some uncertainty, we can begin to see the pattern in the atmosphere. The original high pressure area moves more to the east, while another area of high pressure begins to build over the southern United States. Between these two, we do have some troughiness, And a stronger storm would feel this more and would feel the weakness in the atmosphere and begin to curve out to sea. However, the same pattern can be seen in the European model, but despite this, the storm remains on a more southerly positioning, and it doesn't gain as much latitude. And this is because that a weaker storm will not feel this weakness as much, and it would be guided more by the trade winds closer to the surface. Due to this, there is some spread with the model guidance, where we have some members take a more eastward path, but some are more towards the west, towards Cuba and the Bahamas and Florida. So for the later part of this forecast, you should monitor how the storm behaves in the short term. If you are on the East Coast, Miami, all the way to Virginia, if you are in Bermuda, Cuba, the Bahamas, wherever, this will depend on how strong the storm is, and that will depend on how well it performs within the environmental conditions. Now, I cannot predict the future. Nobody can. So the best thing for you to do is to consult your local officials and stay tuned to their forecasts as the cyclone's intensity and the forecasts are monitored over time. We could see the storm do something like Earl did. Go out to sea near Bermuda, where the weakness is. Or it could struggle with the wind shear, and it could remain southerly, make landfall along southern Hispaniola, and into Cuba or into Florida. We don't know where it'll go, but you need to monitor how it will go, pretty much. I know it's a stupid way of saying it, but you should get what I mean. So stay tuned to your local officials. Thank you for watching. Have a good rest of your day.